welcoming the North St. Louis Soil and Water Conservation District. Thank you. I practiced that. And we're very excited to welcome them here to talk about the landowner things that can be accessed, the programs that they run, and the many Rainy River headwater effect.
So close.
I know, I'm trying. I'm sorry, I tried to practice this. I said it to Andrew earlier and I messed up Rainy River headwaters. So here we go. Let me go again. To discuss what is going on in the Rainy River headwaters and any programs that we can access as landowners in that space. We have Corey, Rachel, and Jake presenting today, and I'm going to pass the mic over to them. Thank you so much.
Feel weird standing behind the podium. It's like I'm trying to hide all my insecurities. Is it perfect? That's much better.
Back in slideshow format.
Excellent. Okay, as it was mentioned, we're from North St. Louis Soil and Water Conservation District. Most districts throughout the state are based on county boundaries, since St. Louis County is super big. We have two. We have a north and south. We're from the north. Our office is in Virginia. Our mission is pretty simple, just to engage people in the stewardship of our natural resources. But diving into it just a little bit more, essentially, we're here to help landowners with natural resource management or conservation issues on the property. You know, we work with just individual landowners. We do a lot of partnering with other agencies, whether that be, you know, municipalities, state or federal. We just have, you know, access to some funding, also, you know, technical design experience and things like that. So we're going to start with the basics. I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence here, but I feel like it's good to start at the beginning and get everybody on the same page. So what is a watershed? It's an area of land where all the water flowing over it or also under it, it's very important to include groundwater, ends up in the same place. I feel like the simple example I use when we talk to grade schoolers is like a shower. Like you've got all the water coming out of the head, hitting all the walls and stuff, and all ends up in the same drain. So you can see in this picture here, you know, anything falling in here is all going to drain and end up in the same place. And then, you know, we have divides created by topography. Like if it's raining, water on this side of the hill is going to flow this way. On this side, it's going to go that way. So then the next natural question to ask is, what watershed are we in? You know, today we have all these fancy online resources available to us for mapping and such. So on like a small level, you can see we've got the gel here with the red marker, and anything inside that blue hashed area is going to end up in Chautauqua. No surprise with looking at it out the window there. The watersheds are kind of like Russian nesting dolls, where you've got the smaller one inside, smaller one inside. So I found these cool duck nesting dolls that I really like. I feel like it's a lot more applicable to watersheds. It'd be great to have as a teaching tool when we talk to kids, but probably not the best use of taxpayer dollars at the moment. But so if we zoom out another level here, you can see we've combined some more watersheds. You can see these light green lines where the previous, you can see this is the Chautauqua, and now we've combined with a couple other ones, you know, like Burnside and Bear Island, and then all this water ends up going into Fall Lake. I'm assuming a lot of you spend a lot of time around here and know a lot of this stuff already. But so then we can zoom out another level, and now we're at the rainy headwaters. You know, we've combined all this stuff. And so this is the level that watershed management plans are written and designed on this level. Obviously, we can keep scaling up. You know, this water doesn't stop flowing. When it gets down here, it keeps going downstream. Again, as many of you know, in Minnesota, we're pretty uniquely situated that we have this big three-way triple divide in the northeast part of the state. We have water, you know, in the north and northwest going into Canada and eventually the Hudson Bay, along Lake Superior, going into the Great Lakes, into the Atlantic, and then a lot of the central and southern part of the states going to the Mississippi and the Gulf. And this like three-way point here is just a little bit north of Hibbing. So obviously not too far away from us. So back to the watershed plans that we had mentioned. In the past, watershed management planning was done based on county boundaries, just to align with the districts. At some point, people realize that probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. When we have a lake that's on the border, or a river, a stream flowing from one to the other, and it's getting one side, or practices on one side of the boundary are different than the others. We're like, how about we do our management goals and planning and things like that based on the boundaries of the watershed, which makes a lot more sense. So this idea of one watershed, one plan came about a while ago. It started being implemented about 10 years ago. So here we've got a picture of all the watersheds on that level in Minnesota. This image is slightly outdated. It's from summer of 2024, but all the green watersheds on there have plans that are already active and running. The couple other colored ones there are in process of being written. I know these white ones are also being written right now, like the Little Fork just west of us here. It should be done being written by the end of the year. And so one important thing that a lot of people ask about is like, where is some of the money and the stuff behind that coming from? It's really important. I feel like we mentioned the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment. In 2008, Minnesotans voted to increase their sales tax a little bit to support a bunch of things. And that money gets split into 4 funds. The Clean Water, Outdoor Heritage, Arts and Cultural, and Parks and Trails. And so the money for this is coming from the Clean Water Fund. And that's like planning and designing and implementing these, and then like all the work that we would do under this, some stuff that Corey and Rachel will touch on more. All that money for these projects would come from the Clean Water Fund. And that's also like what qualifies for a project under this. Sometimes it's helpful to think about it as like buying water quality. Like if we help cost share like a native planting for somebody's cabin, you know, along the lakeshore, yes, that individual person is getting that buffer strip, but we're buying water quality, improved water quality on the lake, which is a public benefit to everyone that can use that. Or same thing on the forestry side, you know, if we help somebody, you know, with the forest stand improvement project, the water that eventually end up in the wetlands or streams going through that forest is going to be improved water quality, which is a public resource. So if we get, you know, more specific now to the Rainy Headwaters, and it's also combined with the Vermilion Watershed, it just makes sense on these two. You know, the Vermilion is kind of nestled in the Rainy Headwaters, and all the water from the Vermilion just flows into Crane Lake. And also land use practices, land types, it's similar. So it made sense to put these two together in terms of planning. So almost 4,000 square miles and almost 1,700 lakes and a lot of miles of stream. That's a lot of water. And also over 70% public land, which obviously you spend a lot of time up here. You're probably aware of that, but compared to a lot of other watersheds throughout Minnesota, obviously that's quite different. Makes this one a little more unique compared to a lot of other parts of the state. About 57% of the planning area is in St. Louis County, which is why it's North St. Louis. SWCD takes the lead on this one. Obviously, there's a tiny little bit in Couchiching, a little more in Cook, and a little more in Lake, but the bulk of it being in North St. Louis. Also, the work area is largely within St. Louis too. Like, you know, most of these projects is going to be working with private landowners, which is going to, you know, like rule out the boundary waters. There's not going to be much work happening in there. And maybe limited opportunities to partner in like national forest or state forest type things. So just the bulk of the private land ends up being in North St. Louis. So we take the lead on that. I feel like it's also important to recognize that like a lot of this watershed is in Canada. It's about 54% in Minnesota and 46% in Canada. Like this watershed plan doesn't have anything to do with what happens in Canada, but I feel like it's an important thing to recognize that we got a lot of water coming from up there too that ends up in here. And these watershed plans are written on a 10-year basis. So this is year 2 of it at the moment. So they'll go for 10 years, and then we can reevaluate and in theory have another one. There's also a midpoint evaluation halfway through to like see how we're doing, see if we need to make some changes. And then this watershed plan has about $1 million in it per biennium. It gets split up between the partners. Based like deciding who has what projects and what needs at the moment. So there's quite a bit of money there available to help landowners. So these are breaking out some of the 10-year goals of the plan. there's 8 main ones, but there's a lot of like sub goals and smaller stepping stones beneath there that we did feel like we needed to go into all the details right here. You can find this plan on the internet if you want to look at it. You can go to our website, or if you Googled Rainy Headwaters Comprehensive Watershed Management Plan, which is a mouthful, you could probably find it there as well. It's about 130 pages. I feel like it's relatively digestible if you wanted to check it out sometime. Within the lake and lakeshore management, restoring 2 miles of lakeshore to natural vegetation, essentially like buffer strips along the shore. In the riparian or stream bank, is restoring 1 mile of stream. There's also 100 acres of agricultural land improvements there. There's not a ton of agriculture in the watershed, but there is a little bit in the northwest, and some improvements could be made there. Forest health, active management on over 4,000 acres of private forest land, and 37 forest stewardship plans. Rachel will touch on that a little bit more. Kind of also on the forestry side, in the land protection is over 1,500 acres in the Sustainable Forest Act, which is essentially saying you're going to leave the land forested for a little bit. Under connectivity enhancement, 10 barriers, which would typically be culverts that are preventing like wetland connectivity or fish barriers, things like that. And the stormwater management, 4 stormwater plans for municipalities and 4 stormwater projects. That would be a little tougher one. Obviously, we have pretty limited municipalities within the watershed. If we come out with a couple planned ones there, I think I'd be real happy. Drinking water protection. Obviously, we have really good drinking water up here. We kind of just want to keep it that way. We don't need to do much restoration, but just protect what we have. And under that is sealing unused wells. That's just important because that's like a direct pipeline, into the aquifer, into the groundwater. So if we're not using our wells, we might as well get them sealed so that just nothing accidentally ends up in those. And also, maintaining or fixing failing septic systems. Obviously, those are a little fragile up here with our bedrock, and we just want to keep that stuff out of the water. And then also water retention, which is essentially like keeping our wetlands. Again, we have most of our wetlands up here, which is really nice, and just trying to keep those ones that we do have. And so one more thing I want to mention before I pass this on to Rachel is a question that we get oftentimes is like, I talked about these lakeshore properties or these bigger forests, but someone who like lives in the city or has a small lots, they're like, what can I do to help? Or is there any opportunity for me? And there's definitely opportunities for landowners like that too. A big one, particularly in Ely and Tower here, is we have the Adopt a Storm Drain program, which was started in the cities. For those of you that don't know, just the city drains along the streets, those don't get treated. Those just eventually end up in our local waterways. So anything that's on the street or that goes down those drains ends up in our lakes or streams. So this program was designed to just get residents, to clean up around those a couple times a year, whether that be salt, other sediment and debris, just so that stuff doesn't end up in our waters. There's a website for this. You can go on, like sign up, give your drain a cool name, and ask that you track how much you clean up and what. And it's pretty cool to see the cumulative impact of that. I think we're at almost 1 million pounds of debris that's been kept out of drains in Minnesota so far, and like 20 or 30,000 different people have adopted drains so far. So if you're around in Ely, or even if you don't live in Ely, you can still go to the website and then drop drains in town. Also native plantings, like that rain garden on the right. If we can just, trap the stormwater on your property instead of it running off into the streets or running out, collecting it in a rain garden, or if you have rain barrels, for your garden or other plants that you want to water, just trying to prevent that water from running off. Also being conscious about your salt use. So it only takes a teaspoon of salt in 5 gallons of water to start affecting freshwater organisms. And once it's in water, it's nearly impossible to get out, especially in like a natural setting like a lake. Not really a big deal up here yet, but in like the Twin Cities or other areas where there's a lot of roads and a lot of water in proximity, it is becoming an issue with salt pollution. And that salt is mostly just coming, from roadway salt and sidewalks. And obviously it's very important. We don't want to slip. We want to stay safe, but like, if you're doing your sidewalks, 3 inches between drains is usually enough. Putting down more salt doesn't make it melt any faster. Also, regular salt starts to lose effectiveness below 15 degrees. So if it's really cold, salting's not going to work. Sometimes it's just best to put in a little more elbow grease with the ice scraper or the shovel instead of having the salt do the work. And we also have the no poop ferry up here. And areas where there's like a lot of dogs, pet waste is really high in phosphorus and other nutrients compared to wild animals. And so that just ends up washing in our waterways. Like nobody wants that either. So, like dog parks or heavily used trails, things like that, people can be good stewards and pick up after their pets. That's really helpful. So now I will pass it on to Rachel.
Great, thank you, Jake. So my name is Rachel Poppe, and I'm the district forester for North St. Louis Soil and Water Conservation District. And so building off of all of these watershed goals that we have, I'm going to talk about why private land stewardship matters in the Rainy Headwaters Vermilion. And so you may be wondering, we just heard about all these different benefits of water quality, but what does the forest have to do with the water? We saw the lakes and the streams and the wells, but how do our forests impact this water quality? And this is important because forest cover really changes how rainfall hits the soil and what it does afterward. So you can see on the right here, there's a lot of different arrows, but when you think about rain falling from the sky and it hits a bare patch of ground, that rainfall has a pretty high velocity. And actually when that droplet hits the ground, it's going to bounce, and that will start to scatter some of those soil particles and dislodge them, which increases erosion. So instead, if you imagine our forest, which is not hard to imagine, we have a lot of them here, this rainfall falls and then it hits a tree, and then some interception starts to happen. So you get some evaporation right off of the leaves and the branches. So some of that water doesn't even hit the ground. It just evaporates right from that canopy. Some of the rainfall is going to filter through the tree canopy and be slowed. So as it goes down those leaves and those branches, the velocity really decreases a lot. So by the time it drips through the leaves and hits the ground, it's going to have much less of an impact and have a lower likelihood of dislodging those soil particles. The same way, some of that water is going to just flow down the trunk. We call that trunk flow. And again, the tree is going to absorb some of that water. Some of it's just going to trickle slowly to the ground. So again, the name of the game with trees is just really slowing and diversifying where that water is going. And then eventually the water is going to get down to the ground. There's going to be some evaporation right off the forest floor. So when it's on that kind of leaf litter layer, before it even gets to the soil, it's going to evaporate back out. And then eventually this rainfall that is filtered through a forest is going to percolate gently into the soil. So again, it's lost that velocity, it's more spread out, and it's going to soak in and have a greater chance of being taken up by the plants that are in the forest. So the forests are really important for our water quality just in regulating that rainfall entering the soil. And then once it does get into the soil, the plants are going to uptake that water, and any particles or nutrients or pollution that are held in that water can get filtered through the roots of plants. So that's another way to kind of slow the release of like phosphorus or other pollutants that are in our water, sometimes just coming from the rain. They can get taken up by these plants and stored and not released into our lakes or groundwater. So with all of that in mind, we do have some priority areas that we're targeting for forestry in the Rainy Headwaters Vermilion. It's a little hard to see. This map has a lot of different information on it, but that dark maroon boundary is showing just the greater watershed. And then you can see those subdivided watersheds with their names. There's different colors for different land ownership and then also for different native plant communities. But I really just want to pull your eye to these green polygons here, or these ovals. And basically what this is showing is if there is land that is not federally owned, which is not much in this area, if it's privately owned, then you're probably in one of these priority areas. But I have their names listed out here. So starting up by Couchiching, we have Ash River. Around Orr, we have the Pelican River watershed. Vermilion Lake is another priority area. Pike River farther down south by Mountain Iron. And then especially up here around this area, Fall Lake, Birch Lake, and Stony River to the south of us. These are all priority areas for forestry. So especially if you have private forest land in this area and you're looking for help, then this is who we're trying to get to with our cost share for forestry. And so like Jake said, these plans have these broad goals. And when we're looking at the watershed forest stewardship goals, looking at forest health and both land protection. So our goal is to increase forest land protection levels. And the method that we do that is through cost sharing woodland stewardship plans with SFIA enrollment. And I'll explain more of that. I know we love acronyms in the government. And then the other thing that we do is just promoting private forest stewardship. And we do that through cost sharing forest management practices. And I'll talk more about what kind of practices benefit water quality in a minute. But first, when we keep talking about land protection and forest protection, like what does that mean? And a protected landscape is just simply an area that is not likely to be converted from its intact natural way to an open or a disturbed state. And so really in this watershed, we're talking about our forests, our lakes, our rivers and streams, and our wetlands. So what we are looking for with this land protection is we are saying, we appreciate these forests and these lakes, these rivers, these streams, and these wetlands on private land. We want to keep them in that state. So we are actively looking to compensate landowners to keep them from being developed or turned into agriculture. So for woodland stewardship plans and SFIA, stewardship plan is just answering some of the basic questions you may have about your forest, like what's in my woods? What tree species are there? How old are they? What kind of wildlife likes to live in this forest? So these are all questions that a stewardship plan can answer. If you're curious about improvements, if you say, I want to improve my woods for climate resiliency, or I'm really worried about these water impacts, like how can I improve my woods to best serve these different natural resource goals? That's another thing that these stewardship plans cover. And then the timing too, it can be really confusing. When do I do management work? When is it best to plant trees? When is it best to do a harvest? What is my timeline for working on these plans? A forester can really help you figure out all of this through your stewardship plan. And thankfully, because there's a lot of people interested in these plans, the SWCD is not the only people that write these plans. So a soil and water conservation district forester can write a stewardship plan, but then anyone that's approved by the Minnesota DNR can write these plans. That includes the DNR private land foresters, which there are 2 monthly that work up in this area, as well as private consulting foresters. And there are lists published by the DNR if you're just curious. There's a lot of folks out there that do write these plans, but we also do always need more. So there's plenty of work if you write plans. So how we encourage landowners through the Rainy Headwaters Vermilion Plan to get stewardship plans for their land, because they're not free, they take a lot of work to write, is that we cost share getting a woodland stewardship plan written for your property. So if it's your first time getting a woodland stewardship plan, you've never had one written before, but you're really ready to do it, we will cost share 75% of that cost. So the SWCD will cover 75% of the cost of the plan. If you've had a woodland stewardship plan before, but now you're just hearing about this, and again, this program is only a couple years old, so some folks have been getting stewardship plans done for a long time. If it's your renewal, then we'll cover 50% of that cost, which is still a pretty good deal. And then the stipulation that we have with that is that if you get a cost shared stewardship plan written to benefit our land protection goals, we require that you enroll in the Sustainable Forest Incentive Act, SFIA. And this is a program that is a combination between the Department of Revenue and the Minnesota DNR. And this is similar to a conservation easement. If you're familiar with how those work, it's like conservation easement light is how I usually describe them to folks. And basically this is the state saying there's a water quality benefit to keeping this land undeveloped. And because of that, we're going to pay you to keep this land undeveloped for a set amount of time. So SFIA, you can have a covenant for 8, 20, or 50 years, and your payment rate based on per acre that you have enrolled in SFIA will change depending on how long you're enrolled. So if you're enrolled in a longer plan, a 50-year plan, you'll get a greater payment per acre than an 8-year plan. But either any rate of time, folks are really happy just to get that promise that land is not developed. So if you are planning on keeping your land as forest for a long time and looking to get a little help with your tax payments, SFIA can be a really great way to sort of offset some of those costs. And it does sort of help pay for your woodland stewardship plan in the long run too, because to enroll in SFIA, you do need to have the woodland stewardship plan. So sort of a whole package deal. If you are interested in a cost share, then you can get a woodland stewardship plan, and then you can enroll in SFIA and start getting those payments. And it's a complicated, this was a really high level overview of it. So if you have more specific questions, I'm happy to answer those later. And then apart from the woodland stewardship plans, we also do cost share some forest management practices. And so this is a cost share for forest management projects that improve water quality. And people don't always associate active forest management with positive benefits for water quality. But for example, tree planting is something that does provide a positive benefit for water quality. You can imagine, if you have an unforested area, or maybe it's been impacted by some disease or some harvesting, and you want to get some more tree cover there, then if you think about how the trees slow down that percolation of rainfall, then we say, yeah, tree planting, get some more trees out there, slow that water down, take up pollutants. Spruce budworm remediation, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with spruce budworm up here, pretty big deal right now. Getting those dead and dying trees safely removed, reducing wildfire risk, and then getting either tree planting done or allowing that natural regeneration just to take its place and get some living trees out there on the landscape. That also provides practical water quality benefits, so we can help cost share those too. And then outside of the Rainy Headwaters Vermilion cost share, there are abundant other opportunities for cost sharing these projects because they can get pretty pricey. So Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, as well as the Minnesota DNR have their own cost share programs. So the best way to get started on any of this, if you have forested land and you want to start working on some forest protection or some forest management, is just to schedule a site visit with a forester. If you're in St. Louis County, you can feel free to reach out to me. If you are in Lake County or Cook County, then I can get you the information for those foresters too. We do kind of work on the county level. So they have foresters that also work within this watershed plan. And like Jake said, these are a collaborative partnership between many different agencies. But yeah, the best way is just to get out and let's go walk in the woods and take a look and let me hear about your goals and your dreams for your forest. And I think with that, I will hand it off to Corey.
Thank you, Rachel. My name is Corey Denning. I'm the resource conservationist for North St. Louis SWCD. Been there, I think, about a year and a half. I'm just going to go a little bit more in depth of how you guys can actually work with us. It can be a little daunting, contracting, stuff like that. So yeah, I'll go into that a little bit more in depth. So how can landowners like yourself actually work with us? Like Rachel said, we do free site visits to address a resource concern, whether that's forest health, erosion, you want your shoreline improved, you have invasive species, you want to improve wildlife habitat, more. Like Rachel also said, provide technical assistance and cost share up to 75%. From the start, we'll do design, oversight from start to finish, whether that's from the initial site visit all the way to when the project was completed. We'll also provide guidance on how to maintain the project. Say you do a shoreline restoration, you got it done, you got cost shared, what do you do after for the next 10 years? We also do education for landowners on conservation practices. Also, if you don't want to do cost sharing, we're free to come up for a free site visit and just walk around your property and answer any questions. So yeah, first, identify a project, must address a resource concern. In our case, a lot of it is pertained to water quality. However, we have some funding to do smaller pollinator habitats, sometimes some invasive species removal, usually go hand in hand with replanting, but rain gardens and some well sealing. That project must meet NRCS conservation practice standards, and that's basically kind of a set of guidelines for us to follow when we're designing these projects. Again, we'll have business cards and stuff, talk to us after, but calling, emailing, visiting a website is probably the best option for the first site visit. How does a landowner qualify for cost share? You have to basically own the land. You have to be motivated to take care of the land and commit to some maintenance. A lot of the projects that get completed sometimes require maintenance, whether that's mowing, weeding, things like that. And you have to be willing to pay for 25% of the project cost. You can do the long-term maintenance, or you could potentially hire it out. How we get our money, we utilize state, county, and federal funds to provide that cost share. Again, 25%. And basically I'll go into the contracting side of things, and the reimbursement. So basically these are just some basic examples I pulled from the internet. I think this one was actually taken from somewhere in Minnesota, that spruce budworm issues. I believe that one is probably just a buckthorn infestation. And that one is a really poor shoreline. I'll go into a little bit more reasons onto why that is a poor shoreline and some of the impacts that's having on our lakes. Essentially, you don't want it looking like that. You want it looking something like that. And then that was more of a forestry picture. So that one was a picture of, I believe Tristan worked with the landowner, doing some spruce budworm remediation on some balsam fir, partnered with the landowner to remove and chip the effect of trees, basically lowered wildfire risk, turning the debris into organic matter that will nourish the next generation and eventually turn into similar picture. It's not, I don't know what it looks like right now, but I'm assuming it'll look like that in a couple of years. So yeah, job approval authority. All of our staff, in order to do the projects with you guys, have to have ourselves or have someone sign off on the project. It's basically just credentials for our staff, basically saying to ourselves and you guys that we know what we're doing. We have the background in doing this work. And another thing is the landowner can do the project themselves. So you can either contract it out to private land forester who does forest management, or someone who does shoreline restorations or native plantings. Or what we can also do is have you guys do the work yourself. We can kind of keep track of your hours and figure that out with reimbursement. This is just an example of kind of like a practice plan. This is all made up. So don't take everything for granted, but this is kind of what it would look like. Kind of do the practice plans. This would be a buckthorn project on, I can't really read what that says, but yeah, so it kind of shows property description. And then I'll go into a little bit more of your soils. So this would be, say I went on your land and you had 3 acres of buckthorn. And you were open to using herbicide. I would tell you what herbicide to use, timing, how year 1, year 2, and basically go into management prescription on how to actually do the work yourself or for the contractor to follow. This is an example of a contract. So say you wanted to go ahead with that buckthorn project. Basically, I would throw together a contract for you guys. Unfortunately, you can't really read it the best. It's basically just kind of some basic information saying you kind of take care of the project. And I think for this, we went per acre. So you kind of see brush management, that it'd be invasive species. And we gave them, I think that's 786 per acre. So I'm guessing if it was, I have to look at the acreage, but basically we assigned them for a reimbursement of $1,634 to get rid of the buckthorn. And then a little bit more into why landowner-led conservation is important. SWCDs vary a lot across from county to county. You obviously were in northern Minnesota, but SWCDs were, I believe, made during the Dust Bowl to address erosion. So southern Minnesota, they work a lot with farmers, whether that's erosion, creating buffers, nutrient issues. Luckily, we don't have a lot of those issues up here, but that leads to us working with you guys to take care of the forest. Some benefits of native plants: they provide habitat for fish, wildlife, and pollinators, hold soil in place, prevent erosion. Similar to what Rachel was talking about, filtering out the nutrients in the stormwater before entering the water bodies. They're also low maintenance. Taking care of a lawn is probably not the most fun if you're mowing, I don't know, once a month. Native plants provide initial maintenance. Long term, you don't have to mow anymore. You don't have to water. They'll filter out the stormwater for you guys. They also provide shade to cool water temps. And if you have geese in your property, they're a great way to get rid of them. Some of this is kind of going into more why shoreline conservation is important. Basically, restoration efforts are not keeping up with development in the state. Luckily, Minnesota is not like Florida where everything is developed, but it's important for us to kind of reverse this trend that's happening. Right now, 9 times more pollution enters a lake with a developed lake lot, with 0.2 pounds of phosphorus entering the lake per manicured or developed shoreline. A lot of people think riprap is the way to prevent erosion. That is no longer, I don't know why that was ever a thought process, but eventually it can create worse erosion. It warms the water. It provides no habitat for wildlife. It ruins fish habitat. And you can kind of see This little diagram I pulled, you can kind of see heavily developed lake lots all around there. The fish are going to be over there. No, there's no habitat for them right there. I think I'm not sure where I pulled that, but I think that's from the DNR website. Minnesota DNR estimates 50% of natural shorelines in Minnesota are gone. Again, that's a little different up here. That is statewide. So we're fortunate to have not as much developed shorelines up here, but if we can reduce that trend, that's kind of why we're here. We're seeing a 66% reduction in shoreline vegetation with roughly 1 to 2% loss of shoreline per year. That leads to increase in eutrophication, nutrient loading, decline in fisheries, and water quality in general, basically leading to overall loss of biodiversity. There is also multiple studies saying if your lake is impaired for a lot of nutrients, your property value goes down. People don't want to live on lakes that have algae blooms. These are some examples of some landowner-led conservation that worked with us. These are all before I started with the SWCD, so I don't know a ton about them, but I pulled them from some past examples. This would have been in Eveleth. This would be on Ely Lake, and it was, I think the park reached out to us. They have this old retaining wall that was failing. We basically cost shared the project, worked with them, hired a contractor out, and I think Jake actually did. When he worked for a contractor, he was actually the one doing the project. So you can kind of see we basically restored it, planted it up, and it looks a lot different now. This was probably year 2 or year 1 after the project. This is another one on Birch Lake. You can see some undercutting, erosion, trees probably going to fall down in the water eventually. Cost shared, design, technical support. We helped them design that, basically implemented shoreline restoration. This would have been on Lake 14. You can kind of see developed lake lot starting to erode, no habitat, not filtering out anything before it hits lake. Gosh, there's a bunch of native plantings you can't see, but there's all a bunch of native plantings in there. That's all I got. For questions, is it better to pass around the mic or?
I
Yeah,
will come
okay.
around.
Yeah, and if you have. If you have questions for Rachel, just make sure it's clear because I'm not a forester. If any forester questions, make sure to be like, I have a question for Rachel. So yeah.
Do we have any questions?
How much land do you have to have in order to get into the program?
If you had specific programs in mind, I'm not sure. For the forestry stuff that Rachel was talking about, like the woodland stewardship plans, that has to be at least 20 acres of forested land. Most of our other programs, there's not a minimum, or we can find some program or grants to help you out.
I'm a little curious about the definition of a private landowner. Is it a resident? Is it a business? Is it a nonprofit?
It could be any of those. Yep.
Possibly.
I mean, typically it's, individuals, but we do occasionally, we've done some projects with the city of Virginia or like some other businesses or something if they wanted like a rain garden in their parking lot or something. So yeah, it is open to essentially any landowner.
Coming up to Lacey. And if you have questions, please raise your hand and I'll keep track too.
You mentioned that the district that you're in or the watershed that you're working in is 73% public land, and that's kind of atypical. I was just curious about like a standard percentage of public land versus private.
I guess I can't answer it off the top of my head, but just, knowing districts from southern Minnesota that is, definitely more the reverse, that are probably 80 or 90%, if I had to take a guess on private.
Also, I'm a word nerd, and what is the word riparian?
Like stream bank. Just an easy answer.
I also love learning about new words, so thank you for introducing me to that word as well. A question over here. Where was the question? Oh.
Three of us in the room are members of advisory boards to the International Rainy Lake of the Woods Watershed Board. Do you do any, and sometimes we go to the forums, the water forums in March, which are spectacular. Do you do any cross-border work with the Lake of the Woods Rainy?
So in this watershed plan, not directly. I also go to the forums. I'm on the technical advisory committee and working group for the Lake of the Woods Watershed Sustainability Foundation as well. So obviously, like, I guess, yeah, I connect with a lot of those partners and stuff, but maybe like work that is directly happening under this plan isn't like super coordinated with anybody on the other side of the border at this time.
I believe it's every 4 years on the ballots, we elect somebody to the conservation district. What does that person do? And yeah.
Good question. So I believe this year is an election year, so you can pay attention to that. So we have like a board of supervisors that is in charge of us. And so they make decisions a lot like on how we spend our money, or like actions we take. Like they don't directly supervise us personally, but like if we cost shared a project, like one of us would bring the project to the board at our monthly board meetings and then talk about it quick. And then the board decides like, is this how we want to spend our money, and votes on it. Maybe, votes on things, whether we do or do not support, kind of like examines our financials. Obviously we're a nonprofit, local government agency, like make sure all that's good to go, and things like that. So they usually just have like a typical, one board meeting a month, maybe some other duties outside of that, kind of read through a pretty hefty board packet on actions and stuff they'd have to vote on during the board meeting. Is that sufficient?
Sure.
Good.
Thanks. I'm sorry if you already mentioned this. If you did, I didn't catch it. Does all of your funding come from St. Louis County?
No, so our funding comes from all over the place. So like this Rainy Headwaters watershed is state funds coming from the Clean Water Act. We do get some money that's like our county general fund that comes from the county. We also get money from the state that's just like general aid that we can kind of use towards anything. And there's lots of other grants we work with, especially in the forestry side of things. We get a lot of money through the NRCS and federal partners. But yeah, we get money from wherever we can.
Other questions? I know that there's a table with information out in the lobby, and I think our presenters can stay for a little bit to answer any other questions that you have, if you would like to chat. Are there any last questions as I make my way to the front? Here we go.
I've had an interesting life, a long life, a couple of years in the Navy, university, 4 decades of teaching logging, chainsaw safety and all that, and building log houses. It just goes on, and I look back and the best parts of my life were the 12 years that I spent as a supervisor on the Lake County SWCD. And at the same time, another 12 years on the local Lake County Board of Adjustment, where we dealt with variances. And in both entities, which I had more fun than I could ever deserve. Nice people, we got stuff done. It was incredible. And the two agencies kind of worked together to me. We were advising people. In one, we had a stick, and the other, we had a stick and a carrot, or maybe just a carrot in the SWCD. But we gave advice. We put people in touch with the experts on our board. We usually had 2 foresters and a biologist or 2 and water specialists and so on. It was just incredible. I really looked forward to those meetings. And then I moved to a different county in Ely and set them aside. But I can't say enough about the good things that we did on both. advising people, education. And on the variance thing, we told them what they really had to do. But the first thing we did was we sicked them on the local, our Lake County SWCD board for more advice. And sometimes partly free advice on what to do, the best things to do with their property. So I just wanted to say, I envy you guys.
Yeah, thanks for those kind words. It's definitely an enjoyable job. And yeah, like we don't usually work in enforcement at all, which is kind of nice on our end.
Being from Ely, I have a watershed question. You mentioned at one point, storm drains not being monitored. Right, for the water quality.
Yeah, I guess there's no monitoring plan like statewide or, anything's set in stone that needs to happen with them as far as I'm aware.
Oh, going beyond that in the watershed, then, all of our city water goes through Miners Lake, which isn't a lake really, it's a mine pit. So is that monitored? Or is it, our lake's monitored and mine pit's not monitored?
I guess I don't know for sure, if Miners Lake gets monitored. In general, other lakes are monitored by the MPCA and DNR, but it's not every year. And there's varying standards. They're not necessarily measuring everything all the time.
So, I have a question. I just wanted to point out to everybody here, one of the statistics that they showed was that 1 to 2% of the shoreline in Minnesota is developed every year. And that seems like a very small amount, right? But 1 to 2% comes out to 154 miles in 2 years. That's the length of the North Shore.
Well, I apologize, our technology isn't quite nimble enough for me to have Tara on the screen, but I just wanted to say the Lake County representative from the Soil and Water Conservation District is on Zoom, and she just wanted to make a comment about the collaboration that's happening between the two districts. And, we recognize there are some Lake County folks in the room, so Tara is a contact for you, and we can help make those connections if you're looking to proceed with a project or get questions answered about them.
Any last questions before we wrap up? Well, nope, okay, it has been